What if someone told you that Genghis Khan was not even his real name? What if I told you he wasn't even born Genghis Khan? Welcome to our channel, where today we will be telling you about the man who started the largest contiguous land-based empire in history. This is the story of Genghis Khan, also known as the Ocean of Mercy. Let's start the stopwatch and get to it. In order to understand who Genghis Khan was, let's first talk about where he came from. He was born into an ethnic group called the Mongols, whose territories were located in what is now known as Mongolia and parts of northern China. Back then, the Mongols lived in small clans or tribes with no central authority governing them. They were nomadic people who made their living by herding animals and did not have a written language. It was during this time that the Mongols were ruled by a system of laws known as the 9 Kieer laws. These laws determined that anyone could become leader as long as they proved themselves in battle and gained the support of the other clans. And so, the title of Khagan meant supreme leader or emperor, which would later be adopted by Genghis Khan. So while Genghis Khan is a very well-known name, it was not actually his given birth name. His birth name was Temujin. The name change came when he defeated a rival clan at the age of 9. As the winner of this battle, he was presented with a golden seal that verified him as the leader of the clan. From that moment onwards, he would become known as Genghis Khan. Genghis grew up around 1162 AD and had a rather complicated childhood. When he was just 9 years old, his father was poisoned by rivals, leaving his mother to take care of both him and his younger brother. Unfortunately, his father's enemies did not stop with his death. Soon after, Genghis and his family were raided by rival clans. During the attack, his wife was taken hostage, and eventually he and his brother were forced to flee into the wilderness. But Genghis refused to submit to any of the clans and instead chose to live off the land by hunting animals for food and clothing. Eventually, his clan allies regrouped under his leadership and began expanding their territory. One by one, he conquered all the clans that had wronged him and his family and brought them under his rule by 1206. After years of warfare, he succeeded in uniting the Mongols under his rule and declared himself the Khagan of the Mongol Empire. Now that he was in control of the Mongols, it was time for Genghis Khan to make a decision on how he wanted to rule over them. As we mentioned before, the Mongols were used to being free and independent people, but Genghis wanted to bring some structure to the chaos that was the Mongolian tribes. In order to do this, he introduced a new legal code known as the Yasa, which would function similarly to European feudalism. This created a hierarchy between the different social classes and established punishments for breaking the law. Any crimes committed against the ruler were considered the highest offense and would result in the death penalty. The Yasa also applied to women, which was unusual at the time. For example, a woman could only be punished for a crime if she committed it away from her husband's dwelling. If the crime was committed within the home, then it was considered a domestic issue and the husband would be responsible for any punishment. Now, this didn't mean that women couldn't punish their husbands. If a wife killed her husband, she would be acquitted of murder, since the Yasa stated that a wife was considered innocent until proven guilty by her husband. Under Genghis Khan's rule, men could also be put into slavery for crimes such as stealing or killing someone. However, there was a stipulation that if a slave served their master faithfully for 5 years, then they were to be set free. Interestingly, Genghis Khan did not force his religion onto others and had advisors from many different religions, including Christian, Muslim, and Buddhist. He allowed each subject to practice whatever religion they pleased, as long as they paid their taxes. Genghis Khan's next order of business was to expand his empire past the borders of Mongolia. Genghis divided his army into 10 equal parts, each led by one of his sons. They would come to be known as the 10 Commandments. Then, he launched attacks on neighboring lands, starting with the Kara-Katai kingdom. This marked the beginning of the Mongol conquests. The Mongol armies were highly effective due to the introduction of cavalry, which allowed them to cover more ground than any other military force at the time. Genghis Khan also employed psychological warfare tactics to weaken his enemies before battle. For example, when attacking a city, he would first send a letter demanding the surrender of the city. The letter went something like this: "We are the invincible Mongols, come submit to us and we shall spare you." However, if the city refused his demands, then he would lay siege to the city and starve them out. After the city fell, he would carry out mass executions of the soldiers and citizens and plunder what was left. There were only 2 exceptions to his ruthless behavior. One was prisoners of war that surrendered peacefully, as they were granted noble titles and positions within the empire. And the second exception was intellectuals, scientists, and engineers, as Genghis valued their knowledge and often spared their lives. As the Mongol Empire expanded, Genghis Khan realized that he needed to improve his communication network. To solve this problem, he invited all the most skilled engineers from his recently acquired territories to his capital city. There, he offered them a position within the empire and asked them to create an advanced postal system. This became known as the Yam, which was a relay system of post houses that stretched across the entire empire. At each post house, there was a designated amount of horses ready to be switched out if a rider needed to travel long distances quickly. Following the defeat of the Kara-Kitai kingdom, Genghis turned his attention to the Western Xia dynasty. Once again, he laid siege to the city and demanded its surrender. When this was refused, he ordered his army to dig a trench around the city. The plan was to starve them out, but the residents of the city were so desperate that they dug a tunnel under the wall and escaped. This angered Genghis Khan, so he had them executed, along with their families. He then completely destroyed the city and moved on to conquer the Quraysh Empire, which was located near modern-day Iran. After defeating them, he moved his capital to a new city called Karakol, which is also where he died in 1227 AD. It is believed that he died from injuries sustained from an arrow wound, possibly during a battle against the Western Xia dynasty. However, it's important to note that there is evidence suggesting that he may have been poisoned by his wife. Either way, he was buried in a tomb that is still unknown to this day, somewhere in the mountains of Mongolia. Genghis Khan's empire continued to grow after his death under the reign of his son but that's a story for another video. We hope you enjoyed learning about one of the most powerful leaders in history. If you want to learn more about his descendants, then check out our video on the 5th largest empire in history. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.